I was born in 1936 in Sisseton, Wahpeton. How we say it in our language is Sisseton Wahpeton Reservation in South Dakota. And my mother was from that reservation, and my father was from the Medewa-Kantuan Reservation, and enrolled as a Medewa-Kantuan, and he was born in Flandreau, South Dakota. At that time, in 1936 and 40, most Indians were just coming out of what we called reservation concentration camp lifestyle. Most Americans do not know, and people in the world do not know, that America put all Indians in concentration camps. And I believe that Hitler took the idea of concentration camps from what America did to us. So I was living in the time when we were just coming out of that concentration camp. I didn't know it was a Holocaust that we had just experienced, our parents, our grandparents, and there was nothing for us to do. And I remember being so happy with what we had, and even though we had nothing, when all we would do is go from family to family with horse and wagons. Now the horse and wagons came from the government and the churches. If you became a Christian, you got a hoe and a shovel, and the longer you stayed with the church, you got a wagon and a horse so you could get around on the reservation.
Kind of sacred incentives, so to speak.
Instead of coercion into this religion to become Christian, Indians were coerced. But Indians also knew at that time, our leaders, our grandfathers knew, that it was a way to survive, for our children to survive. So to succumb to the coercions of Christianity, my parents were Christian. And the fact that Christians and Christianity forbid Indians to speak their language and to practice their ceremonies, I think the churches are responsible to reinstate the languages into the nations, since they forbid Indians to speak their languages and do their ceremonies. I think this is a serious indictment that we would like the churches to respond to. And recent years, 5 years ago I believe it was, the Catholic Church, the Pope in Rome issued an apology to all Indians for what they had done. You cannot just apologize for what you have done unless you make the retribution of what was done. In other words, reinstate those languages to those tribes. Help reinstate those ceremonies. And also, if you've taken land from Indian people, you either have to pay for it or give it back, or both. I never thought that this was a Holocaust, but I was happy. My dad was a lead singer on the traditional drum. So we went to all the powwows because of his ability to, his awareness of all the traditional Dakota songs. So we went to all the powwows when we were young. At that time, children could not dance. Only people over 50 years of age could dance. Most people do not know this, that the government forbid children to dance Indian. And that was so they could wipe out the culture in the young people and not upset the older people and let them dance. And then finally the new generation would never know what happened. And that was why young people back when I was young, we couldn't dance. And very shortly after that, the policy of assimilation and boarding schools, government boarding schools, were basically military-style schools, were put into operation for assimilating Indians into the society. And then the Christians, missionaries came, and we were doled out to the missionaries. And the government boarding school I was at in Wahpeton, North Dakota, there was 400 of us, and they came, and you 50 will be Episcopal, you 50 will be Catholic, you 50 will be other religions, Mormon religion, and so we were doled out to the churches in bulk numbers for the sake of this assimilation. And we had no idea what this Christianity was. And now as I look back at it, it was all part of the grand plan to have Indians assimilated. Indians would then go into the city, assimilate, and then they would leave the reservation lands, which would be taken away. That was the scheme.
Were you punished in these schools for trying to speak your own language?
We were speaking our language, and yes, we would get our mouth washed with soap, and we'd have to, if we did that in the church or whatever, where the missions were, we would have to kneel down with on marble, pads of marbles under our knees. When Andrew Jackson was in as president, after Cherokees had helped save his life in a battle in Louisiana, the Cherokees saved his life. He turned around and marched all Indians out of the southeast into Oklahoma, which they called Indian Territory, which was the largest concentration camp in the world. Today it still remains the largest economic concentration camp in the world. I think that Andrew Jackson typifies what America really wanted to do, get us out of the way.
Well, what they call America's founding fathers were really America's first terrorists that we encountered. I mean, it was a whole terrorist society who forced us from the land, exploited all of our timber and mineral resources and petroleum resources, not only here in Minnesota, and you played in a movie one time called Clear Cut about how the timber companies looted the Ojibwe people in particular, but Oklahoma, which was supposed to have been set aside for all the different native nations that were on death marches to Oklahoma, then the oil companies came in and stole all the petroleum. And now we find that $137 billion that was collected over 100 years, which was taken right out of the mouths of our elders, out of our children, has disappeared from U.S. Treasury accounts. So first of all, force them from their land, place them in concentration camps, and then take their resources. What's new? I mean, this is what's going on yet today.
No wonder America has the most powerful army in the world. The resources that are taken from our land, no other country is able to take that mass amount of resources and then put that into the energy of building one of the largest armies and high-tech army in the world. You know, we will have to constantly speak to all this, and we need a voice, and I'm glad this station becomes one that the world can see. Technology has given this ability to us, and we're going to use it to speak to the world. And I think this could be a world show eventually. We need the world to be in support of us. I think most of the world does know that America sits on stolen land. And recently I was listening to one of the most respected politicians in America, Jimmy Carter. He was on a talk show, a cooking show where people are cooking and discuss different kind of ways that they cook in their area. And Jimmy Carter was on the show, and the host said, "Isn't it that you're home and you're from Atlanta, Georgia, and you have lived, understand your parents and your family lived there since the beginning of your generations here." And he says, "When did your family start living there?" "Well, my family's been in Atlanta, Georgia ever since the Indians left."
As if they left voluntarily.
Yes.
One morning they woke up and said, well, let's leave and allow these crackers to settle on our land.
Jimmy Carter said, "My family has been here in Atlanta, Georgia since the Indians left." I couldn't believe this man who is for human rights in such a great way has that little understanding enough. And that's what America does. They change the wording, the semantics of what happened here. And Jimmy Carter is one of examples of modern day to explain that that land that they were sitting on in Georgia was there because the Indians left after Andrew Jackson put them in concentration camps in Oklahoma.
You're watching AIM Internet Television.